John's question is about animals before the fall, and he just asked a very simple question. Were all animals herbivores before the fall? Or, as you would say in Houston, herbivores. Were they herbivores, wherever it is you're from, before the fall? I want us to consider a couple of scriptures here, first of all. And the first one would be Genesis chapter 1, verses 29 through 30, which in its simplest sense answers the question. Genesis 1, 29 and 30. And God said, "Behold, I have given you," now he's speaking to Adam or man, "I have given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree which is the fruit of the tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat." Then it goes on. That's for Adam and Eve. You've got all the fruit-bearing seeds and trees, and that is your meat. Now, the word for meat there is a word that really is just for food. That shall be your food. Verse 30, Genesis 1:30, "And to every beast of the earth." Now, here's where the answer comes in. "To every beast of the earth, and every fowl of the air, and everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat, and it was so." Now, there's the possibility, you could argue, it's an argument from silence, and it would be very weak, but an argument from silence to say, well, he didn't say you couldn't eat meat. He just says, I've given you every herb-bearing plant, I've given you that for meat. Now, I think that in a normal reading of the word, and this is what you would do, is this is how you ought to read the Bible, is normally. In a normal reading, a normal person reading normally would take Genesis chapter 1, verses 29 and 30 and say, man and beast and fowl of the air were all herbivores. There wasn't any ravens that were eating the roadkill or whatever it may be. All of them were herbivores. Now, with that, then, I would also like to read Genesis chapter 9 and verse 3. Where we're coming off of the ark, Noah's ark, and God speaks, gives a fundamentally new revelation when he says, every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you, even as the green herb that I have given you all things. So this goes back and says, yes, previously I gave you the green herb, and now every living thing shall be meat for you. Now he opens it up for Adam to be a carnivore in addition to an herbivore, vegetarian. Now, so I think that you can put those two verses of Scripture, Genesis chapter 1, verse 30, Genesis chapter 9, verse 3, and you can put these together to say, prior to the flood, your question was, were they herbivores before the fall? And I think they definitely were, but I think even they were herbivores all the way up to the flood. This answers one of the questions that comes to us, and that is, how in the world did Noah have all those animals on the ark? These things aren't going to get along with each other. And yet, I think prior to this point, there were, first of all, the animals were not carnivores, and second, there was not a fear of man within the animals. I think that came after the flood, and I think you can read that from Genesis chapter 9 very clearly and very normally. It is in there. So my position, and I think it has very strong biblical grounding, is that prior to the flood or up unto the flood, that both man and beast were all herbivores. Later they became carnivores. Now, someone probably says, oh, wait a minute. There's fossil evidence. I'm not sure there is, but they say there's fossil evidence that those animals had sharp teeth. And thus, therefore, they were carnivores. Now, I think one doesn't follow the other. I think you've made a conclusion that is not merited by the fact that there are sharp teeth. I know some vegetarians that have sharp teeth. I know some vegetables that take sharp teeth if you're going to be able to eat those kind of things, especially the rough foliage that many of the animals would be eating. I think it's quite normal that there would be sharp teeth. It just so happens those sharp teeth also work for eating meat, but I'd remind you that animals don't boil their food before they eat it. They eat raw and rough. And they take it, and there is a need for tearing and pulling. So I just think it has no bearing at all, the fact that they have sharp teeth. So I think the answer to the question, were animals herbivores before the fall? I'd say yes, even after the fall, all the way up into the flood. Now, many of you know, of course, that I am a dispensationalist, and a dispensationalist, one of the things they do is look through the Bible for something that fundamentally changes everything. And then we call that a new dispensation. And of course, there are arguments over, is this a fundamental change or not a fundamental change? But nonetheless, the root of dispensationalism is we're looking for that fundamental change. And I would say after the fall, there was a fundamental change between God's relationship with man and God's relationship or man's relationship with even his creation. Then there was another fundamental change that came with the flood. And all of a sudden, those animals were for meat. That changed the whole picture of everything. So, great question. I appreciate that, John.